Hello and welcome to Agatha Christie Read With Me. That's right, I'm still alive. I apologize it's been so long since the last video, just a lot of life stuff happening, but we're back at it. And for those of you that are new to this, welcome. The basic format of this is not a replacement for reading Agatha Christie novels, but more of an addition to, a bit of, if you wanted to read Agatha Christie novels, then this would be a good companion piece for that, as we basically go through chapter by chapter. I read a chapter, you read a chapter, pause the video, and then once we're both done, unpause the video, and I'll go over my thoughts on what happened and update our investigation board to come up with theories and timelines and all sorts of great stuff to try and figure out who done it in this particular novel. Now, if you have been to this channel before, I am going to be changing things up just a little bit. Instead of having one massive long video covering an entire book that's going to be like a 3-hour long video, I'm going to be breaking it up into chunks. So this will make it a bit more manageable as far as me releasing on a more regular basis and getting content out to you. So today we're going to be capturing chapters 1 through 4 of the Agatha Christie classic, Murder on the Links. I'm looking forward to this one. I've never read it before, and I'm very curious to find out what Poirot has in store for us today. Now, this particular novel was first published in 1923, which means it has aged out of the copyright protection. It is now available for free. I'm going to include a link to the Gutenberg project below, so you can get your hands on a copy for absolutely no cost. If you don't have a copy, but you have an e-reader, or you just want to view a PDF on your computer or phone, that's perfectly fine. You can read along for free. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. I have my copy, you have your copy. Let's both read chapter 1 together and find out what happens in Murder on the Links. So at this point, you should have read through chapter 1. If you haven't, pause now, get to reading that, and then come back. So that's generally the way this works. So let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at the investigation board for Murder on the Links. Not a whole lot going on right now. We basically just have this one train scene between Hastings and the woman who announces herself as Cinderella. We also have Cinderella's sister, who we don't know anything about her. We just know that she was referenced as somebody that Cinderella was looking for. And I also included Hercule Poirot into the character list here just because, well, it's pretty well, it's a given. He's going to be in the book. So, yeah, those are our 4 characters so far, and not a whole lot to report. Look at the detail of chapter 1 here. So Hastings is currently traveling on the Calais Express from Paris to London. He's working as a secretary to an MP, and he also rooms with Poirot at this point. They are roomies. And on this train, he notices a young woman that he dislikes, her demeanor, her use of swearing, so on and so forth. She's that modern woman that, oh, Hastings has not aged in our modern times well. But yeah, he dislikes her until he notices that she's pretty, and then, well, may as well give her the time of day. They wind up in conversation, each telling a little bit about each other. He talks about Poirot and mentions the Styles case. She gets off the train in Calais and proclaims that, we're probably never going to meet again. When you said you were from 2 different worlds, you were right about that. So, see ya. When he calls after her, she replies her name was Cinderella. There's really no reason to linger on this one. We're just establishing some things, but we do kind of get the impression, we're pretty well outright told that despite what Cinderella said, they do indeed meet again, the circumstances of which later on in the book are going to be something to behold. So once this all really starts kicking into high gear, I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to talk about, and we're really going to want to take our time with it. So let's not waste that time just hashing over the incidentals of establishment. Let's get to chapter 2. I got my book, you got yours. Let's get to reading, and we'll meet back up in just a moment. So we have our first case and we have our first twist, all in the same chapter. Without actually a whole lot really going on in terms of any information or clues, possibly. We do have an interesting letter, but let's get into the characters first. To the investigation board, we have a few characters added to the board. First of all, Detective Inspector James Japp, who is so far the only recurring character in the 3 Agatha Christie novels well, to date. Where Scotland Yard helps, or Hercule Poirot helps him out. Nothing really to report with James Japp. He was trying to deliver some cases, and they also thanking Poirot for some other ones. But the real meat of things came when a letter came in the mail from Monsieur P.T. Renaud, who, it gets established, is an English South American millionaire who has a house in Merlinville, France, in Rutland Gate, England, and in Hertfordshire, England, and spent most of his life in Chile and Argentina. Getting into the chapter summary, we basically have Hastings and Poirot just chatting over breakfast. Poirot is bemoaning the lack of interesting cases, as well as bemoaning the shapelessness of a cottage loaf of bread. Hastings then persuades Hercule to open a stack of morning letters, and in that stack is the letter from P.T. Renaud, who is saying, "I go in daily fear for my life. I will send a car to meet you in Calais. May be necessary for you to go out to Santiago. For God's sake, come." Not a hastily scribbled signature, but one with emphasis put on it. From P.T. Renaud via Genevieve, Merlinville-sur-Mer, France. Something tells me that there's going to be a lot of French things in this novel, and I may drift in and out of an inadvertent attempt at some level of pronunciation. I'm going to try and leave that at a minimum. I just tend to drift into that, so apologies in advance. So yes, Poirot wishes to leave at once with Hastings. Hastings doesn't have a whole lot to do, and Poirot is jazzed for finally an interesting case coming across his desk. And they discuss generally what they know about P.T. Renaud, which is not a whole lot. But 11 o'clock sees both men departing Victoria for Dover. And upon arriving at Calais, they find that no car has awaited them. Poirot says, that's probably because the telegram was delayed, so they went ahead and hired their own car. And Poirot has a bad feeling about this. He's getting the bad vibes on the drive over. On the way, stopping at a small cottage for directions, Hastings sees a young woman, and of course, he is madly in love with her. He thinks she's a goddess. And Poirot admits only seeing a young girl with anxious eyes, that two people can see the same thing and not actually see the same thing. Arriving at the villa, they are stopped by an officer who tells them they can go no further. Monsieur Renaud was murdered this morning. So there's the twist. They go to take a look at this case that they were hired on for, and come to find out that the person that thought they were in grave danger, it looks like they were right, more right than any of them knew. Right now, we're still kind of in that establishment phase. We don't really have a whole lot of solid information, no real data to churn on, no real clues to follow. The most we really have in any kind of physical evidence sense is that letter. And is it wise to follow physical evidence? Well, according to Poirot and the whole thing about fingerprints and the handwriting recognition, it was all covered in chapter 2 here. Not entirely, but that's pretty much all we have to go on as the readers thus far. So, not a lot to discuss yet, but I have a feeling chapter 3 is going to kick things into super high gear. Let's find out if I'm right. Let's get to reading, and we'll meet back up. Talk to you in a moment. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. We are hitting the ground running. So much has happened here, and that's going to be evidenced by how much our investigation board has blown up. We have tons of new characters. We have a timeline. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Let's just quickly go through the chapter summary here. Poirot and Hastings toss themselves into the investigation by meeting with Commissary Lucien Bex. They tell Bex of the letter that sent them there, and was informed that the body was discovered around 9 o'clock in the morning. Evidence points to time of death at 2 o'clock in the morning, which I'll get to that in a little bit. And then at that point, the police bring Poirot up to speed with the information that they have so far. Francois finds the front door ajar in the morning. Leonie finds Madame bound and gagged almost the same time Monsieur Renaud's body is found. Body is found face down in a freshly dug grave, stabbed in the back. Mrs. Renaud cuts free, and Dr. Durand examines the body at 10 a.m., reports of two men entering the bedroom to tie Madame up while abducting Monsieur. Dr. Durand prescribes Madame a sedative to calm her. So at that point, Poirot gets familiar with the people of the household. We will get into those characters in more depth in just a little bit here. But first, testimony begins. Francois says she fastened the door the night before, said that Madame de Breuil had been to see him that night, but left before she fastened the door, about 5 minutes before she did. Indicates that Madame de Breuil is a frequent visitor of Monsieur, that they have a friendship that she would not speak to the nature of. But says that Madame Renaud thought of this friendship between Madame de Breuil and Monsieur politely, but thinks she suspects more. In evidenced by Madame has grown thinner and paler since they arrived a month before, but also saying that Monsieur has changed as well, always had his worries. Basically, they moved into this place a month ago and have deteriorated ever since. Gives a timeline of the account of the nightly retirements of everybody and proclaims that the stairs creak awfully, so she can hear everybody going up and down them, so she's able to give an accurate account of that. Heard nothing else during the night and was first downstairs in the morning, finding all the windows fastened, and also the front door is ajar. Then we speak with Leonie, who, if I'm pronouncing that wrong, please correct me, but Leonie, who provided an emotional testimony. Really didn't get to hear too much from her. She was very, the book described her as hysterical, talks about finding the mistress gagged, and confirms she heard nothing else during the night. Then we talk to Denise, Leonie's sister, who says that she confirms that Monsieur has changed. He seems depressed, worried, and says that Madame de Breuil came to see Monsieur 2 nights ago, not last night. Last night was a different woman, unknown woman, shorter and younger, believed to be English, and heard Monsieur tell the mystery one, yes, yes, but for God's sakes, go now. At which point they bring Francois in again, who confirms adamantly that the woman that came last night was indeed Madame de Breuil that visited, and says that Denise is probably just making things up to make herself seem important, and also said that yesterday was the day that Monsieur declared he would not need the car and sent the chauffeur on holiday. Okay, so we're talking about a lot of different people here, so let's get into who they all are. First of all, we have a lot more police than Detective James Japp. We have Commissary Lucien Bex. We have Monsieur Hotet, who is the examining magistrate. We have Dr. Durand, who is the medic at the crime scene. And we have Monsieur Giraud, who is from the Soleil, which, as I understand it, is an investigative body. Now, I don't think that we have heard of M. Giraud, that he is on his way. He hasn't arrived in the picture yet, I don't believe. But I kind of moved Cinderella and Cinderella's sister off to the side here. We'll get to them in a little bit because I have a few suspicions. But we have P.T. Monsieur Renaud, whose name is now in red because he's dead. That's the way it works. We now know that he is married to Madame Renaud. Not necessarily they have a son. Madame Renaud has a son of Jack. That's all that's really specified. So the implication there is that Jack is Madame's son, but not PT. Otherwise, it would be they had a son. But instead, it was Madame had a son. We get introduced to the character, well, sort of. We get introduced to the concept of the character Madame de Breuil, who lives in the Ville Marguerite, down the road from Ville Genevieve, who comes, by all accounts, seems to come at night often, poor but beautiful, but lately has more money to spend. Interesting. And also has a daughter of an unknown name. We don't know that yet. We also have the mystery woman. Nothing really known about her there. We have the Renaud household staff. We have Francois, who is a servant and has lived for several years with the former owners of Villa Genevieve, basically stayed on with the place when it got sold to Monsieur Renaud a month ago. Léonie Aulard and Denise Aulard, both young maids, both lives. Residences in this are a little hazy because by all accounts it seems like they retire upstairs, so they live in the house, as one might expect, but maybe it's just talking about when they live in Merlinsville, that it's when they're not at the house. Maybe they were born and raised there. Not sure yet. But by all account, they come from respectable parents. And then we have the chauffeur, name as yet unknown, was away on holiday during the crime. So let's get into the timeline here. And I changed this up a little bit. The last time we had a timeline was with the first book, Mysterious Affair at Styles. We didn't really need one with The Secret Adversary, but I'm changing things up with the timeline and this format a little bit to accommodate some more dense information taking place within a smaller window of time. And I think that'll help out a lot because it seems like a whole lot happens in not a whole lot of time. So getting that information parsed out is going to be important. So 2 days before the murder is the night that Denise testifies Madame de Bria visited, but not the night before. During the day, the day before the murder, that's when Monsieur Renaud dismisses the chauffeur. 10:25, Francois hears Monsieur Renaud let Madame de Bria out. Nighttime, sometime, Denise testifies the woman visited Renaud, but not Madame de Bria. We don't know exactly what time that is yet, so it is entirely possible that Monsieur had two visitors, the mysterious woman that Denise is testifying on, and Madame de Bria that Francois saw and hears Monsieur let out. 10:30, Francois confirms she locks the front door, and at that time, according to her testimony, we see that she goes to bed and Denise and Leonie go up with her, and Madame had retired sometime before. Monsieur at that point was still in the study, but only 10 minutes later, that's when Francois hears Monsieur Renaud come upstairs to retire. So the timeline, according to Francois, is 10:25, she hears Monsieur let the woman out. 10:30, she locks the door, goes upstairs, and 10 minutes later, she hears Monsieur go upstairs too. So far we don't have a whole lot. Some of this is kind of templated out, so it's blank, but so far we don't have a whole lot in terms of day of the murder. We have 2 o'clock suspected time of day, and that leaves a question in my mind, but we'll get to that. 9 o'clock, body found stabbed in back, face down in an open grave. Also 9 o'clock, Leonie finds Madame Renaud gagged and bound. General term of mourning, one would suppose before 9 o'clock sometime. Francois was the first one down, finds the front door ajar. 10 o'clock, Dr. Durand examines the body and gives Madame a sedative. So the question that kind of raises in my mind, we have some notes here about the body when it was found. Time of death estimated by the medical examiner between 12 o'clock a.m., midnight, and 3 o'clock. So according to the servants, testimony says 2 masked men entered the bedroom, bound Madame, and abducted the husband. So that seems to be confirmed at the very least. We'll see if that's reliable or not with the testimony, but that seems to be the consensus, is that 2 men entered, and that's when everything went down. But it seems a little odd that we have an account of 2 men entering, but nobody heard anything that night. What causes them to believe that 2 men entered? We're still yet to find that out. There's a lot of questions on the board here. Only 2 actually on the board here, which is, this is a question that I had prior to the very end of the chapter when Poirot himself asked it, so I'm a little proud of that one. Who was to send the car for Poirot if the chauffeur was sent away on holiday? The car was supposed to meet him. Would they have hired it out? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So why was the chauffeur sent away when this whole Poirot thing was up in the air? And what is Madame Renaud's evidence that places time of death firmly at 2 o'clock in the morning? Medical examiner said between midnight and 3, but Madame Renaud's evidence gave it for 2 o'clock specifically. Why? Well, that's a question that's probably going to be answered in chapter 4. We know that she's been given a sedative, so we're just going to have to see what more information shakes out as we get established with more timeline, more testimony, and more accounts of what happened. We'll maybe hopefully find out why it is that the police are saying that the household is saying 2 men entered. And furthermore, who is this mysterious woman? Is she Cinderella or Cinderella's sister? Or perhaps she is the daughter of Madame de Bria. But do you think if that was the case, then either Francois or Denise would have recognized her, just kind of, I'm assuming, being from the village. So I don't necessarily think that, but Yeah, I mean, who is the mysterious woman? My money is kind of going on Cinderella, but we're going to find out. So chapter 4 awaits us. Let's see if we get any more answers or we just get a lot more questions. Probably a little of both, but here we go. So some interesting revelations here in this chapter, but we don't quite yet get to talk to Madame Renaud. Instead, we open up the chapter with the group of police, Poirot and Hastings, talking amongst themselves, discussing who they believe between Francois and Denise. And Beck says of the two of them, he believes Denise for a number of reasons, and the last of which was, besides, our own knowledge tends to show that Renaud was entangled with another woman. And that reminds them that they have not yet shown Poirot the note that they found upon the body. Sacre bleu. Sorry. So yeah, they show the note that is coming from Bella, the mysterious, somewhat desperate love note showing that whoever it is it was addressed to has not been responding as of late, and there's a hint of murderous desperation behind it. So yeah, I mean, there's some motive there, but I have a few questions about that, and we'll get into that after the chapter synopsis here. Regardless, Poirot at this point doesn't think that the threatening tone of the letter is what led to his services being sought, that Monsieur Renaud was not so concerned about the contents of the letter that that's why he thought his life was actually in danger enough to hire Poirot. And the misogyny that is kind of baked into a lot of these stories is just an element of the times. I kind of make it a point not to comment a whole lot on it. So we'll just say that this is me duly touching on it because sometimes it is a little tough to read, but you know, it was written in the 1920s. There is a certain element of what are you going to do? So moving on. The commissary said he will follow up with his inquiry in Santiago, finding out more about Monsieur Renaud and his life and affairs there, hoping that that will kick up some information under those stones as he knocks them over. The group discusses the deceased's will. And in the will, it specifies it's very clean, very simple. 1,000 pounds goes to Mr. Stoner, Renaud's secretary in England, and everything else goes to his wife. Again, very clean, very simple, written 2 weeks prior to his death and witnessed by Denise and Francois. The only thing is, in that simplicity, it does leave their son vulnerable should Madame remarry. Then her new husband could, at that point, legally wrangle and finagle things to leave their son without a penny. And in this case, it does reference their son. So I'm going to go ahead and I haven't done it yet, but I will go ahead and make the adjustment to put the son under both of the parents there. Previously, it only said that it was Madame's son, but this was the first reference towards both of their sons. So yeah, we'll just see how that plays out. Then the group goes to the study and checks that out. And Poirot is very suitably impressed. It's pretty spotless, not a speck of dust to be found, freshly cleaned. But in that freshly cleaned aspect, he does notice that the hearthrug was askew. It's the one thing that was slightly out of place. And under it, he finds a 2-inch by 2-inch tear of paper, which they surmise by reading it and establishing the color of the paper and so forth, that it was a check made out to Duveen. Poirot also finds a woman's long black hair on the back of the leather chair. So with the study being investigated, they then go to the back of the house to the shed where the body is currently being stored. All the photographs have been taken, but they had to move the body. So once the photographs were all done, they moved it to the shed. And now this group is shown the body and also shown the very sharp knife, which is now in a glass jar, but it was found still in the body. No fingerprints on the knife, and the body only has underclothes under the overcoat. So I'm assuming kind of a night dressing gown with an overcoat thrown over it hastily. Francois knocks and says that Madame is ready to receive the group. I guess the sedative that she had wore off, and she's ready to answer some questions. So they all leave the shed except Poirot, who looks back at the body one more time and says, he wore his overcoat very long. So Not a lot really on the timeline to update. We didn't get a whole lot of new information in terms of anything to add in chronological order. We do have a few new characters coming here. We have, I didn't add Mr. Stoner yet. I will go ahead and do that. But we do have Bella, who wrote the letter. We don't know anything about her other than her name is Bella, and everything that she wrote in the letter, that's what we know about her. And then also Duveen, the mysterious character who the check was made out to. And the group said that they're hoping that Madame Renaud would be able to shed some light on that. As far as any of the other paper that was previously found with that scrap that went under the hearth rug there, unfortunately, it looks like it was burned in the cleaning of the room. Everything was kind of swept up and tossed into the stove. So, yeah, what are you going to do? So hopefully Madame Renaud was able to shed some light on Duveen and the nature of that check. So, no real notes. I do have evidence exhibit here of the letter from Bella. And I did add a couple new questions here. The first of which is, why was Monsieur Renaud only in his overcoat, and why was it too long? If Poirot says it as a point of notice, then it is absolutely critically important. It's specified that Monsieur Renaud was of medium height. So perhaps the overcoat belongs to somebody else that is taller, that left it behind. What is the circumstance that would cause him to be out and about in the backyard with only this overcoat on over top of his dressing gown, or whatever his underclothes might have been? Who can say? Maybe he was in the middle of the night and there was some knocking on the window. Maybe in the footsteps going up the stairs that Francois heard 10 minutes after she went upstairs. Maybe that wasn't Monsieur Renaud. Maybe that was somebody else after luring him outside and causing him to throw on an overcoat. But the timeline really wouldn't match up there. It's a good question, but no real answer at this point. I did finally add who said there were two men that entered the house. I have a feeling, since they're going to interview Madame Renaud in the chapter 5 coming up here, that she is going to be the one that says that. So in terms of how we know there were two men that entered the house, all it said was that they heard it secondhand from the servants. So I imagine Madame Renaud said the two men, told the servants told the police. That's the secondhand account, but we're going to hear it from the horse's mouth in just a moment, I have a feeling. So it's a temporary note, but it's a good question until then. And then, this is the big one. This is the one that I really think is important here. Who is the note from Bella actually addressed to? Because I'm not convinced that it is addressed to Monsieur Renaud. There's a vagueness to it that I think is kind of purposeful in the structuring of the story. The letter was found upon his person, but that doesn't mean it was meant for him. All it says is, my dearest one. Wouldn't a mistress know that the person that she's having an affair with be married? How would she not know that there was another woman? So the tone of the note just seems a little odd. But more than anything else, it was the my dearest one. That portion of it right there, the vague, almost purposefully vague addressing to. So I'm going to wrap up this video here. We're going to get back to it in the next video as I continue on with this series, because again, we're breaking this up a bit here. So we'll be continuing on with chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 5 leading up to 10. But if I were to come up with a theory right now, and this is very early to be coming up with any kind of theory, I would think that it would be a situation of the letter from Bella actually belongs or was addressed to Jack Renaud. That P.T. Renaud and Madame Renaud, we do have her first name. I'll have to add that to the notes here, but yeah, we do finally have her first name. But that they have been distraught because Jack has put something down upon their household that they are having to deal with this whole Bella situation. And perhaps Bella and this mystery woman are one and the same, And perhaps, in fact, Bella, the mystery woman, and Cinderella are one and the same. Maybe Cinderella's actual name is Bella, and she is the mystery woman that visited Monsieur Renaud the night before the murder, was visiting in some sort of relation to Jack, and things came to a head. That's all I got so far. And it's extraordinarily flimsy. Like I said, it's very early days. We have a lot more information to go through. We don't even have Madame Renaud's testimony yet. So I just kind of feel like at the very least, at the end of one of these videos, I should come up with some sort of hypothesis. So there it is. Yeah, not in any way kind of a coherent thing, but it's what I've been able to kind of piece together so far. So let's get to reading the next chapter, and I will see you in the next video, which hopefully I will have out in a couple of days. So thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you on the next one, and we'll pick back up with Murder on the Links Part 2. Talk to you soon.